But you realize it's something deeper. And you realize that love progresses into deeper and deeper and deeper things. Not in the sense of, well, it's just routine now, we're just together, it's just, we're just used to it. You never really get used to it. I mean, how do you get used to a miracle? That doesn't make any sense. That's weird. And so you never quite get used to it, but you continuously find yourself in wonder and awe of it. Because it is the highest, it's the thing that makes us humans. To love like this, selflessly, entirely, completely. Because virtue, obligation is what you do. You create the obligation yourself, and you create the responsibility yourself. You see it through. Can you see how that's so much better than saying, I love cheeseburgers and I love my mom? And so the opposite of it seems to happen more like in the categories. So for example, you've got love and hate, which are emotions. And the opposite of that is the absence of emotion, of course. But within this category of emotions, if there's any emotion at all, suggests that, how do you say it? Well, it can be turned around. It can be changed. Like if, we say like an object in motion tends to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. If your emotional sentiment towards a person is at rest, it's very difficult to get it going and to be interested in them in any way. Some of you maybe can relate to this, but is it possible to turn hate into love? Yeah, I've done it several times. It's very possible. It's very possible. Because why is it that you would hate somebody or hate something? It goes back to the same idea about why was it that we would be indifferent towards the death of the grandparents of a stranger, but care about the death of the grandparents of a friend of ours? Because we're emotionally invested in our friends. We're not emotionally invested in the stranger. And so how is it that love and hate are connected? Because there's an emotional investment in them. The only people that you can really truly hate are people who you're emotionally invested in. And I know there will be people who will say like, I hate Stalin or I hate Hitler. Probably not in a real true sense, because you don't know them and they don't personally impact you, unless maybe like in my case, my grandfather was in Auschwitz. So because I have that connection, I might be able to say that. But then again, my grandfather passed away when I was so young that I don't have any memories of him. So no, not really. So you'd have to have like a real close connection to that person. So the only people that we can really hate are the people who are somehow really closely connected to us. Just like the people who betray you, it's difficult to be betrayed by a stranger, because betrayal suggests that they had some kind of an obligation to you. If they never had an obligation to you, then there was no betrayal, there was no backstabbing. It was just business maneuverings or political maneuverings or whatever. But if a person has a connection to you, we feel like there's some obligation there. And so we can only really hate a person who we actually have had a close connection with in some way. I mean, truly hate them. I know we use the word all the time, but that's, as I was talking about this last period, that's part of the poverty of our language in English. Do you hate, I don't know, anybody here in here hate, anybody in here hate onions on your cheeseburgers? Yeah, a few of us hate onions on our cheeseburgers. Those of you who hate onions on your cheeseburgers, do you guys hate, I don't know, genocide? So you feel the same way about onions as you feel about genocide. Understood. And if genocide makes you sad, and so does getting onions on your cheeseburger, then you understand what it's like to go through a genocide, because they both make you sad. Yes? All right, questions, comments, concerns, complaints? The point of what I'm saying is that because of the poverty of our language, sometimes we will use a single word to describe situations that are just dramatically different, like genocide and onions on cheeseburgers. Now, it gets even worse when we talk about love. Like if I were to ask you what love is, it's very difficult for us to explain it, to describe it. In this class, have I ever talked about like the different forms of love, like in Greek? Know that? Okay. I try to do this every year. I wasn't sure if I had done that yet this year. So if we're speaking in English, we've got this one word. We've got love. And we'll draw a little heart around it. Have I talked to you guys already about what the heart is? Why we use that sign for a heart? Once you see it, you can't unsee it. It'll be hard to see in this one, but if you get like a real one, that actually looks good, it's the silhouette of two people kissing. The outsides, yeah. The head and the legs come around. So next time you see like a well-drawn heart, you'll see it. Once you see it, you won't be able to unsee it. That's one of those things that should stand out to us maybe. Like, if you ever said what an actual heart looks like versus one of these, it's like, where does that come from? It looks nothing like that. That's why, because it represents something else. So now, if I'm speaking English to you, and I tell you that I love buffalo wings. I love buffalo wings. And then in the very next sentence I say, oh, and by the way, I love my mom, man. Do I feel the same way about buffalo wings as I do about my mom? Hopefully not. Hopefully if I'm on a boat and the buffalo wings fall in the water and so does my mom, hopefully I would save my mom before the buffalo wings. If you really feel the same way, you should. If you were to say that you love your spouse, your wife, and your sister, you love them both. Again, hopefully you love them in very different ways, unless you're from Kentucky. Now, in Spanish it gets a little bit clearer. We have te amo y te quiero. What does te quiero mean? Quite literally. What? I love you. It means something. But that's the interpretation of what it means. But what does it actually mean literally? I want you. Te quiero. Yeah. Now, everything else, like the I like you or I love you, those are interpretations of the phrase. But the phrase literally is I want you, which is very different from te amo, which is more closely akin to love. But the point though is that at least you've got these two different words that can differentiate how you feel about somebody or something. But when you get into Greek, it gets even more concrete. There are various forms of love in Greek. The first one is a word called eros. This is kind of like infatuational love. Like when you see somebody and you're attracted to them, you're infatuated with them. Think of like the beginning, I think earlier parts of a relationship. You think about them and there's that exciting part of your life. There's another form of love though, which seems to follow from this. It gets built on top of by this. That form is called philo. And Philo. Hopefully it looks familiar. We get the word philosophy from this word here. Philo, love, Sophia, which is the highest human virtue, which is wisdom. If you know someone with the name Sophia, we should let them know you are the highest human virtue. Now, the point of this is that you start here. But after this starts to fade away. But if you're close with the person, if you develop a real connection with the person, eros becomes philo. You follow? So now this is like a friendship type of love, where you guys are so close that now you're friends. You go places together. You can dress down and be like your normal person around them. You can actually just watch Netflix together. It's like you're real friends. Now, when you get to this point here, there's a little bit less of this. But you don't lament the loss of this because you realize that where you are is something is someplace that's deeper and more meaningful. Because this isn't as more permanent. This is an emotional-based thing. And emotions, as we know, tend to go up and down. This is a little bit more solid. This is almost like part of like a routine thing. You're friends, you guys are close together, and you know things about each other that other people don't know about each other. This is where you start to learn like how a person likes their cheeseburger, if they like it with onions or not. And isn't that really one of those thresholds? Someone brings you food. If you haven't had this yet, you'll discover this. When someone brings you food at work, and you're surprised they brought you food at work, and then the food they brought you is the way you like it too. You realize, they know I don't like onions, or they know that you do like onions. You're so close that you're even finishing each other's sandwiches. And then after philo comes another form called sterge, or stergo. Sterge for plural. And this is like a family type of love. This is the kind of love that you have between, siblings, parents, aunts, uncles, that it grows into. And in the case of a romantic love, quite literally family. This is the whole point of a marriage. You're not just friends, you're not just infatuated and attracted to each other, you're kind of deciding that this is a lifelong thing. You can move away from your family if you want, but they're still your family. You can't undo that. If you have an argument with your family, as big as the argument is, and you guys swear that you're never going to talk to each other again, you almost always come back and talk to each other again. It might take a day, might take a year. Sometimes, in the case of someone I know, it took 7 years after arguing with her dad before they ever even talked again. But eventually we tend to come back. And again, that's like a family kind of a thing, so it's like a permanent situation. They invite you to, your friends invite you somewhere, they're inviting your other half as well. But there's another deeper form of love, which it's almost indescribable, except through I'll just write up on the board, agape. Agape. And this is the kind of love that, again, there's no English word for it. It's, how do you say it? It's duty-based. It's not a thing that you feel, it's a thing that you do, if that makes sense. You do this, why? Because it's the right thing to do. In other words, your love has now progressed through all of these stages, that this is like its final form. You do something for a person because you've chosen to, because it's the right thing to do. Maybe not even because they deserve it, but because you've committed to doing it. The greatest form of love that you can find of any of these is that you would give your life for your friend. That's the deepest form of love. There's no greater love can you have than that. And so now understand what that means. If you grow up in a society that has this kind of a language, you're going to see why this society is going to have lower divorce rates than any other society. Because you fall in love with the person, eros, attracted, infatuated, you like being around them, it's exciting. As it progresses, a little bit less excitement because there's more routine. But the routine means it's something that you can count on. There's security there. There's dependency there. There's interdependency there. You guys are becoming one person. Then you get to Stargate, which you basically are one person, almost inseparable from one another. This is why fighting and arguing between each other, that's just like you're arguing and you're fighting with yourself. And this is why it will bother us so much. You know? So you do things here because, it's safe to argue here. It's safe to argue here because you know that an argument doesn't mean that you're never going to talk again. It just means you're having a big disagreement that you're going to come together again, just like any other family, as bad as it is. But then this final form over here, again, that's just like you do things just because that's what you do. If any of you guys have grandparents, they've been married for 149 years, how do you guys stay together for so long? Because that's what you do. That's what you do. You don't have to be 200 years old to have this. The earlier you have this, of course, the better it's going to be. Because then you can grow up within this. And obviously you need to grow towards this, but once you're in it, you can grow up in it together. And again, it's a deep form of love. It's not common. You don't find it everywhere. Any of you guys ever go to weddings and you hear that 1 Corinthians 13, love is kind, love is patient, doesn't keep account. You guys have heard that before? That comes from the Bible. And the word that's being used there is this. It's non-emotional, duty-based action. So the next time you're at a wedding and they're reading their vows and they're very all lovey and emotional, like love is kind, love is patient. Just think about that in your head. Non-emotional, duty-based action is kind. Non-emotional, duty-based action doesn't keep records, doesn't keep account. But the thing that it does do is it survives all things. It lasts because it's not dependent on the other person. It's dependent on you. And when you're both in that same sync, because it's what you do, well, that's the thing you work towards. It's the permanency of it. So there's a beauty that's there because you realize when you lose this and you go here, it's like, yeah, we've lost this, but I've got something better and deeper. And then you can move on to this. It's like you've lost a bunch of this, but you still have some of this, you have a tiny bit of that, but you realize it's something deeper. And you realize that love progresses into deeper and deeper and deeper things. Not in the sense of, well, it's just routine now, we're just together, it's just, we're just used to it. You never really get used to it. I mean, how do you get used to a miracle? That doesn't make any sense. That's weird. And so you never quite get used to it, but you continuously find yourself in wonder and awe of it. Because it is the highest, it's the thing that makes us humans. To love like this, selflessly, entirely, completely. Because virtue, obligation is what you do. You create the obligation yourself, and you create the responsibility yourself. You see it through. Can you see how that's so much better than saying, I love cheeseburgers and I love my mom? Yeah. And of course, having the vagueness of that is what can create a lot of issues with people. If you guys know where you are and you know that you're on the same page, you understand that you're into a deeper thing, and it's good teamwork. It's good teamwork. And so, knowing what love is, first off, is really important. Knowing that hate is not the opposite of any of these things, because you can't hate a person unless you have some sort of a connection to them emotionally. But once that apathy hits and you're genuinely indifferent towards people, that's where that's where that love fades. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques? I apologize, not much of a voice today, but it is what it is.